hearing about the biggest set of strikes from the US, wave of strikes across the country in Yemen, targeting Houthi rebel positions. It started on Saturday, the biggest strikes in 3 years at least, when the Saudi-led air war was ongoing. Now, Iran is playing the innocent victim in controlling rogue terrorists in Yemen. That's the latest claim from President Trump today, as the US military continues its air assaults with more strikes earlier today, according to the Houthi militants. The White House warning, too, that Iran will be held responsible if the Houthis return fire. Well, the Islamist group, supported by Tehran, claims its actions are in support of Hamas in Gaza and will continue striking at US vessels. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about the roots of the fruit of this story, the complications, the contradictions, and try to see what's at the heart of events. Let's go to London. Let's bring in Andreas Kreig, Associate Professor of Defence Studies at King's College University and a Fellow at the Institute of Middle Eastern Studies. Great to have you on the programme, Andreas. Let's first of all start with your reading of the situation right now, this huge wave of strikes.
So certainly, as you already rightly mentioned, these are extensive strikes that have been launched all over the country. Certainly the boldest strikes that we've seen from the US since the beginning of the war in Gaza. Certainly far more extensive, far-reaching, and also targeting directly not just military facilities, but also trying to target Houthi leaders. That is certainly a major escalation from the US point of view, but I would see this within the overall context of what Trump is trying to achieve with this mega deal, which would include obviously the GCC, would include Iran, and also obviously the Houthis to an extent. But instead of going after one of the root causes, which is obviously the Gaza war, and trying to solve this, he's now going after one of the symptoms. And obviously, over the last 18 months or so, we've seen the Houthis really being emboldened by the war in Gaza and by the response by Israel, United States, and the UK striking the Houthis in Yemen. That has actually been very counterproductive. And what we've seen over the last years as well, since the war that was led by the Saudis, is that the Houthis are not really responsive to deterrence by punishment, and hence usually instead of just putting pressure on them and changing their behavior, I think that will just further embolden them.
Let's go through some of the areas that were struck, Andreas. So we go down to this is since Saturday, the southern point of the territory that they hold in Yemen, the Al Bayda Governorate in, I think it's Muliras as well, all the way to Sadr in the north, Marib, Hajat, Dunmar, these multiple locations. More than 50 people killed, we're told. The US saying that they've managed to kill a number of, quote, senior members of the militant group as well within that. But there's something strange going on within this, and I wonder if you can sort of pinpoint it for me. It's the fact that there hasn't been Houthi strikes since the ceasefire began in Gaza. What's your reading of why the US strikes started? Is entirely down to trying to pressurize Iran on its nuclear situation?
Well, I mean, this is part of Trump's gambit, right? He usually starts out with quite a lot of pressure, trying to pressure a negotiation partner into a corner, into a position of weakness from which then Trump wants to engage through discussions and negotiations. The thing is, though, I think Trump understands as well. I mean, the US understands, the US military understands that there won't be a military solution to the Houthi problem. The Houthis have been proven to be extremely resilient. Even if they've been able to sustain years and years of strikes from the Saudi-led coalition as well. They have not been strategically weakened. Even in terms of degradation, the network of the Houthis, which it is essentially, has not been substantially degraded. So taking all of this into account, I think Trump knows that there isn't a lot to be achieved militarily on the ground against the Houthis. You can degrade. But in the end of the day, this is supposed to be the opening gambit to a greater negotiation. I think what Trump is getting wrong here, though, is that the Houthis, yes, they are funded by Iran, and obviously the technology is Iranian technology. But after all, they're a Yemeni actor. They're deeply ingrained, embedded in the local community. And as such, they're not vitally relying just on the Iranians to switch them on and off. I mean, they have a great degree of agency and autonomy. And I think what we've seen over the last 6 weeks or so, ever since Trump came into power, the Iranians have really told the Houthis to keep their feet still, to remain calm, do not escalate, don't invite any retaliation from the United States. And the Houthis seem to have, even though they haven't struck, their narrative has certainly been one of, we're escalating now, we want to put more pressure on Israel. And Trump is someone who responds to narrative with further narrative. You pressure him, he's going to double pressure you. That's kind of how he works.
Briefly, we have about a minute, but I do want to hear your thoughts on this. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State in the US, saying this weekend that they will carry on until they've ended the capability of the Houthis to attack. I'm guessing you in what you've just said, you're not sure that that's going to be the case.
No, they're a low-tech operator. I mean, they have a lot of high-tech stuff that they get from Iran, but a lot of the drone technology, even the missile technology, is fairly low-tech. And my point is, as long as the Houthis have access to some of the weaponry that they can reverse engineer to use against shipping around the Bab al-Mandab, they will use it. So essentially, it has to be a political settlement, and even striking Iran will not make any difference will have not any major impact on how the Houthis operate around the Bab al-Mandab.
Great to talk to you, Andreas. Andreas Kreig, Associate Professor at the Defence Studies Department at King's College in London. Nice to talk to you this evening.
Thank you.
Let's go from there. Let's